talk about my hormonal acne journey. Now, in all honesty, I do wish there was more videos like this back when I first started to struggle with hormonal acne back in like around 2015 or so, because at the time there wasn't a whole lot of information about the struggles of dealing with hormonal cystic acne, especially specifically when it comes to it being caused by birth control. Okay, so let's set the scene. Now, pre-birth control, I didn't really suffer much from hormonal acne. I had pretty clear skin throughout my teenage years, early adulthood. It wasn't until I turned 21 that I decided to go on birth control. So up until that point, I didn't really struggle much with acne or with weight gain. I was kind of one of those people that could eat whatever they want and they didn't really think about adding weight or losing weight because my weight was pretty steady throughout most of my life, basically. Now, the reason I went on birth control was for birth control's intended purpose of preventing pregnancy. Now, of course, my sex ed class was very limited, and the only thing that was taught was that every encounter that you have unprotected sex, or even just like protected sex, but something can go horribly wrong, that you will obviously result in pregnancy. So that scared the hell out of me because I'm someone that doesn't really want kids. So I wanted it to be the most effective form of being able to not get pregnant. So that is kind of like my mentality going into my research, which research. The only research I really did was going onto the Planned Parenthood website and just looking up the most effective types of birth control, and I just kind of went with that. So the one I decided on based on the statistics on this one website that I looked at, which was Planned Parenthood, was the Depo-Provera shot. It had the highest efficacy, and then later on I would go and switch over to the implant, the Nexplanon implant. Now, of course, at 21, I didn't have insurance, so I just went into Planned Parenthood. They kind of, like, I'm trying to remember now that it's been like forever ago, but they didn't give me a whole lot of information about the shot. It was more of asking me questions, of course, are you currently pregnant? And they did mention that, I don't know if that was mentioned or if it was like in one of the papers that I had to sign, but there was a 1 year limit to the Depo-Provera shot because there was a increased risk of bone loss. And of course, to my 21-year-old self, that didn't really mean a whole lot. Now, of course, looking back, I really wish there would have explained that a little bit more in depth because I think of why I decided to go along with it is because they didn't really think much of it, so I didn't think much of it. So I get the shot, go my merry way, and I have to go in I want to say it was every 3 months to get the shot again. Now, I did see some cycle changes. I started spotting a lot more frequently, and it was one of the possible side effects was irregular cycles. Up until that point, my cycles were pretty regular and they weren't really painless or anything like that. I didn't really have any issues with my cycle. And up until a certain point, they just kind of stopped. So about into my second shot, so roughly around 6 months in, I did notice that I started to gain a lot of weight. Now, up until that point, I didn't really think much about my weight. It stayed consistent throughout most of my life, so it wasn't something that was on my mind. So with a span of a couple months, I gained roughly about 10 pounds. I had started out at like 118-ish, and by the end of it, I was weighing in at around 128. Now, of course, this takes a pretty big hit to my self-esteem because it's not you that you so much yourself notice that you've gained weight, is that everyone around you is letting you know repeatedly that you've gained weight. So from that point forward, I did a lot of restrictive eating. I did a lot of pretty intense workouts just to try to lose some of the weight that I was gaining from the birth control. At the time, I was working out maybe 4 days out of the week. I also started doing keto for a couple months, and then I ended up switching to vegetarian and then vegan. And I was really obsessed with how many calories I was consuming. That was kind of like the first point in my life where calorie counting was a thing. I was really obsessed about that. And no matter what I did, how I ate, how I worked out, I wasn't able to lose the weight. And this is kind of a little bit of a side note on some of the research that has been done on weight gain caused by birth control. And some of the consensus is that it's not the birth control in itself that is causing the weight gain, but more of the hormonal fluctuations making you change behaviorally to cause the weight gain. And I don't really sit well with that because nothing mattered what I ate, how much I worked out, if I was in a caloric deficit. Like nothing that I was doing was changing the scale, my at home scale. So, and the fact that they're trying to say that changing behavior is what caused the weight gain, it didn't quite sit well with me. And also the fact that it was kind of like a weird weight gain. Like usually well, I can't say usually, but when you think of weight gain, it's usually like in the abdomen area, in the stomach area. But when it came to the Depo-Provera shot, the weight gain I experienced was a lot of water weight. It was like I was hooked up to a hose and just kind of like expanded. So yeah, that reasoning to me doesn't really make sense at all. So fast forwarding a year, then I ended up stopping the Depo-Provera shot since it wasn't recommended past that point. And while I was at the Planned Parenthood office once again, I just asked the person that was there what they would recommend as the next form of very effective birth control. And she recommended the implant, the Nexplanon. So while I was there, I switched over immediately to the Nexplanon, and I want to say I do still have the scar. So they basically just like inject you with it, and it's like in this metal, like a really wide metal syringe, and they just kind of shoot it in there, and yeah, off I went. Now, during that transition, I don't think my cycle came back. If anything, I might have just like spotted again for a couple of weeks at a time, as one does. And I did start to notice within a couple of months that the weight gain that I had gained, the water weight, was starting to go down. So that was a really good sign. Now, during the Depo-Provera shot, I did have a little bit more acne than I was used to, but it wasn't anything crazy. Now, a couple of months after getting the implant, I did start to see like an increase in hormonal acne, specifically like right around this area and my cheeks. It just started to become more and more noticeable. Now, I did keep up my workout regimen of 3 to 4 times a week, and I had kind of like this fear that whenever I lifted weights or anything, because I either heard something about a implant snapping in half, or I don't know if I just like read that or if that was my fear. Every time I lifted weights, I felt like tension there. And I don't know, I was always worried that I was just gonna like snap it in half if I was working out too hard. So I mostly just focused on like a lot of cardio. Now, the implant that I got was a 3-year implant. So around the 2-year mark, I did notice that the cystic acne was a lot worse. I think maybe out of my whole cycle, which it wasn't really a cycle since I don't think I was bleeding at the time, but roughly there was 3 weeks out of 4 that I had a brand new breakout on my face. My face became very swollen, very painful to touch, to put skincare on, to put any makeup on. And of course, I was extremely self-conscious about this. I would not go anywhere without makeup. I think I was even wearing makeup when I wasn't leaving the house just because I didn't want to deal with what's going on my face, basically. Of course, I was trying every skincare hack regimen I can come across on the internet. I tried different chemical peels. I had a friend that was going in to be an esthetician, and she could get her hands on some like good quality, like high grade chemical peels. So I bribed her to steal me some, and I was doing that as well as just any type of exfoliant. There was alcohol white pads, like for I think it was like Neutrogena's alcohol pads, like for acne, and they had like a lot of alcohol in them. I was putting anything that was going to sting my face to try to hopefully be able to tame my face somewhat. I did at some point save enough money to go to a professional esthetician to get more chemical peels done. And let me tell you, it was not a good experience. Not because the chemical peel was too much. If anything, she said that my skin took it very well and she was able to keep it on longer than she had originally thought. But just kind of like the comments, I think I remember her saying something along the lines of not all the people at like the spa, because it's a spa, not everyone at the spa would be okay handling someone with so much hormonal acne, and just a lot of things that were very hurtful. And I'm just like looking back thinking like, why would you say that if you want someone to come back and you're just kind of like, okay, whatever. But yeah, anything I tried would be a fix for maybe like a couple days at a time, and then another breakout will come back, and it would just be a never-ending cycle where I would wake up every day touching my face and just kind of seeing what was new on there essentially, and then feeling horrible about it. Up until this point, I didn't know what was causing the acne. I was changing up, obviously, the skincare. I was rotating it to just anything that anyone would recommend that was good for acne. I was also changing my pillowcases almost like nightly. I was doing all the things, drinking a butt ton of water, really watching what I was eating. I looked at what kind of makeup I was putting on, making sure there was nothing that would cause breakouts even more. So trying to stick with like BB creams, but had to be BB creams with a lot of concealer in them. And it wasn't until I was kind of on the internet one day, as one does, going through forums, that someone mentioned that they had really bad severe cystic acne from their birth control, and the birth control that they had mentioned was the implant. So that kind of sent me down another rabbit hole of looking at kind of like the side effects aspects of the implant. And I was roughly like 2.5 years into having the implant, and I decided to take it out. Now, of course, as you can imagine, it was very expensive to take it out, and also they, like at the Planned Parenthood that I had initially put it in, they didn't quite want to take it out just yet. They're like, oh, we should just wait until you're done. You only have like 6 more months, and then you can switch it out, try something else. And I was just like, I want this out immediately. So I'm Colombian and my family's still in Colombia, so I flew overseas and I was able to get it taken out. Now, of course, they do have their Western medical model over there as well. So the doctors, they took it out and they gave me a couple of prescription of birth control pills. They're like, okay, if you don't want to get pregnant, then just switch over to these pills. And they gave me like 5 boxes for like, I don't even remember. It was like a government run office, so I think they gave me like 5 boxes for like $20, which I mean, like looking back, I mean, that's nice. But at the same time, it wasn't something that I needed, especially for what was going on, which was all of the side effects from the birth controls that had been on before. Okay, so now I finally was finished with my birth control journey, and I thought everything was gonna be good. My skin was gonna clear up. Now that I lost all the water weight, everything would just kind of return back to normal. But it did not. Oh no, it did not. It got so much worse. It got so much worse. Now my cycles, of course, stayed very erratic. They became a bit more painful, not excruciatingly painful. My mom has endometriosis, so luckily I didn't get, there's like a genetic factor to that, and I didn't get that. But it was more pain than I had experienced before the birth control. And the cystic acne did not go away. If anything, it just got worse. Now, of course, this sent me on a pretty big spiral, and I saved up some money and decided to see a virtual dermatologist. Now, I don't think this company exists anymore, thankfully. There's like other ones that are similar to it, but essentially you take a couple pictures of your face and you send it to this virtual dermatologist, and they send you back a prescription and some creams. The creams, they didn't really do anything, but I don't remember the name of the prescription, but it was a certain form of antibiotic that I was prescribed for about 4 to 5 months, which now looking back, that is pretty bad that I was on antibiotics for that amount of time for acne. That is, uh, but it helped. My acne did clear up and all was well, but I knew that I didn't want to be antibiotics that long. Like some part of me knew that that would not be good for my gut health, just overall microbiome, and just I knew if something should be done. So I kind of reached back. I'm like, hey, what can I do? I don't want to be on this forever. And kind of her response was, if you stop this, then it's going to come back. So I ended up stopping it because it just didn't quite feel right. And of course, the hormonal acne returned with a vengeance. So I continued to struggle with it for an additional 6, 7 months, and of course, still being bombarded with suggestions and recommendations, as people do, which I mean, I'm sure they're trying to mean well, but with every conversation being like, oh, have you tried so and so product? It's really good for acne. You, of course, try it because you're just trying anything, any soaps, skincares. I actually remember this one time when me and my family were traveling and we were going to go pick up a rental car, and the guy on the other side of the counter was just like, hey, I have this one ingredient that is really good for acne. You should really try it. You should really try it. And I'm like, oh, okay, what is it? He's like, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. or like not tomorrow, but like when we go to return the car. I think we were in Canada. I want to say we were in Canada. We were like traveling. So then we go travel, do our thing, frolic, and go back to return the car. And he did indeed keep to his word. He brought the whatever it was. It was weird because it wasn't in like a labeled bottle. It wasn't like a product per se. It was just in like what I remember to be like a juice, like a plastic juice bottle. And he just kept in the fridge and he gave this to me. And it was like this clear, like what when you will see like witch hazel, because it's like almost like water. And he handed it to me. He's like, "Here, put this on your face. It will help immensely." Of course, I threw that away because that is sketchy. But I mean, it's good intentions, but it still doesn't feel the best to get bombarded like that when you're just trying to forget what your face looks like. So that torment continued for another 6 months when I decided to save up even more money. At the time I was serving. So I decided to save up some more money and actually see a in-person dermatologist. She was super sweet, super kind. She hugged me. She felt bad. I'm sure she knew like the struggle behind my eyes, the torture. She ended up prescribing me spironolactone, which don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure, but I think one of the indications to taking it is high blood pressure. So she gave me the prescription. It did help. It did help with the acne. The acne went away. But because it is a blood pressure medication, then whenever I did a lot of exercise, even just like cleaning, honestly, would make me feel nauseous, dizzy, and I'd have to sit down. So I was on that for not too long. I want to say like four months or so. When once again I reached out, I'm like, hey, I don't want to be on this for like ever, or like when can I get off of this? Because like at that point, those 4 months, my skin had been relatively clear, and she said there's a really, really good chance that you stopping this medication will just bring the acne back, which of course is not what I want to hear, and it also just did not sit well with me. Now, I forgot to mention this, but ever since seeing the original esthetician, I was being pushed Accutane multiple times through multiple people. So why haven't I been on Accutane? I should be getting on Accutane if I really wanted to get rid of this acne. I was pushed it probably like minimum 10 times up until it was probably like 1 year window where it got really bad. And the terminologist, the dermatologist also recommended, have you tried Accutane? What are your thoughts? Now, I looked into Accutane a little bit and I've talked to people that had been on Accutane, coworkers that, once again, of course, they're just like, you should be on it. It's the best thing ever here. And it also just didn't sit well with me. Like looking at the side effects, the even just talking to people where they're just like, yeah, I have chronically dry eyes now. And I'm just like, what does that mean? What do you mean? Or that their skin really dried up and it was really flaky, like just like systemic dryness, essentially, which what I now understand as systemic dryness. And that doesn't sound the best for your body. So, of course, I was just like, no. Like, I think unconsciously I was looking for the root cause and finding a more natural way to heal, obviously, the acne, but also just what was going on. Because up until this point, I still didn't realize it was hormonally. I understood it was because of the birth control, but I didn't understand kind of like the mechanisms of why it was still affecting me. So ultimately, I left the dermatologist and continued to struggle for a bit further. Now, a couple more months go by, and I have to go to Colombia to get my wisdom teeth pulled out because, once again, as a girly without health insurance, one does what they can. And plus, my uncle's a dentist, so that just kind of like worked out. Now, after I went and got my wisdom teeth pulled, which was the most excruciating experience, honestly, a little bit traumatizing because I refused to go under, so you can only imagine what local anesthetics and hearing drills and cracking of bones just sounds like for like an hour as they take all four of your teeth out. Anyways, after they got my wisdom teeth pulled out, there's a reason for the story, I promise. After they got my wisdom teeth pulled out, the pharmacist there gave me a prescription for painkillers and they gave me another prescription for this word that I haven't seen before. And he was just like, okay, so take this prescription to, there's gonna be this lady like 3 doors down and it's going to be like full of plants. Just go in there and give her this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I go down the three doors and there's like this little like plant shop and I'm just like, are you sure this is it? But my mom's like, yeah, this is it. So I hand the old lady, she was like a sweet old lady, the prescription, and it was a prescription for calendula, a flower, an herb. So she wraps it up on like this newspaper, gives it to me. She's like, okay, because like it's obviously she's from like dentist. She's like, okay, just make a tea of this and swish it in your mouth 2 to 3 times a day. It should help with like the bleeding and the swelling. And I was just like, crazy. Because like I mentioned before, there is now more of like a Western medical model, but a lot of the times it is paired with kind of like that traditional herbal knowledge, which is super, super amazing. So I used the calendula. It really did speed up the healing process. And when I came back to the States, I really wanted to look into herbal medicine. And that's kind of like what propelled me into becoming a clinical herbalist. Now, I did look on like some websites on like what herbs can be good for like your cycle health, but like I didn't really get a very definitive answer, which now looking back, I understand why, because our hormones are connected to so many different systems of us because I mean they're part of us and they work as one. So there really was no way for someone to be like, yeah, this herb will help with your cycles and that's it. So I really did believe that this path was going to help me figure out my hormonal health. And I think at this point, I really did understand that it was my hormones that were causing the really severe cystic acne. So I ended up going into the beginner and intermediate level of the Herbal Academy, learning about hormones. It wasn't until I got into the intermediate level that I kind of had a pretty good grasp on hormones and what impacts our hormones that I was able to make my own from a blend and kind of start healing my hormones and the acne. So altogether, I suffered with hormonal acne for about 6 years before I was able to finally address it in a natural way that really focused on like the root cause, which was the hormone imbalance that was left by using birth control, and then of course everything else that I had also used the really harsh and strong chemicals on my face that left my skin extremely dry and very sensitive. The fact that I was on antibiotics for like 5 months straight just because of the, I mean, I don't want to say just because of the acne, because at the time I was just like, yes, finally something that helps. But it really messed with my gut health, and I'm still trying to kind of fix that gut issue because it does really imbalance your gut microbiome, which I've had to really try to rebuild. But now I think I'm at a pretty good place where I don't really feel the need to wear foundation, or I actually had transitioned to a BB cream, which I mean, one of the good things to take away, obviously, besides like the knowledge that I got and kind of like the new path, which is why I really focus on cycle health because just everything I've been through, I've kind of wanted to be someone that would be a good resource for anyone struggling with not only hormonal acne, but just like cycle issues in general. But I really got a pretty good understanding of kind of like the healthier ingredients when it comes to both skincare and makeup. So I was wearing BB cream, like a good, I think it was the Honest Beauty BB cream that I liked. And around like where the plague hit, I didn't really find the need to wear any type of anything on my face since like no one would see it anyways. But yeah, since then I haven't really needed to, well, felt the need to wear BB cream, and it feels a lot better just to have like sunscreen on and just focusing on like really good ingredients from like skincare perspective because once again I was just trying to heal that skin barrier that I had spent years kind of going ham at with like anything that was abrasive and like chemically. My skin was very damaged after that. I still definitely have scarring and some hyperpigmentation, which you can really see whenever I get like flushed face or like when it's hot out. And it's kind of been hard to tackle that now that it's been like a couple of years. Like, it's definitely gotten better slowly. Like that's why I don't feel the need to wear BB cream. But I am still trying to balance that good ingredients versus like a harsh ingredient. For instance, I know that one of the recommendations for hyperpigmentation and scarring is retinoids, but there is some studies that show that retinoid or vitamin A can negatively impact your thyroid. And I know my thyroid currently has been taking some hits from just like family stress, and just me being a high stress individual in general has impacted my thyroid a little bit, so I know that's not something that I want to go down, even though it might help with the current scars and hyperpigmentation. So I'm looking currently at, there's like this brand which I don't remember the name of it, which I don't want to recommend because I haven't tried it yet, but there's like this natural type of retinoid that is that does have a good standing with the skincare database on EWG, which is what I would recommend everyone look at their skincare ingredients with, just to make sure there's nothing fishy in there. But yeah, on the database, it's kind of like one of the only affordable options for a retinoid that has good ingredients and has like kind of a good balance of that vitamin A. But yeah, let me know if you want me to kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive on like skincare, kind of like what I learned, what I'm looking for in skincare when it comes to hormonal acne. Actually, I do have a guide on how to look for skincare when it comes to hormonal acne. I'll have that linked down below. But yeah, let me know down below as well if you have any comments, questions, if you have similar experiences. I feel like what I would really have liked to have is other people kind of not so much going through it, because I mean it was some dark times, but people that I could relate to and not just people that had really nice skin that you'd be like, why can't I have that? But yeah, see you guys next time.